Notre Dame's top-ranked commit in the class of 2025, four-star quarterback Duce Knight, has reportedly visited two SEC schools in the past week, and now the Irish must do everything they can to keep him. For the latest on his recruitment, stick around for today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Friday, August 2nd. So happy Friday to you. And thank you for getting your weekend rolling with us by making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And this show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're on the go and you're listening to the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, no Friday mailbag today. I know I said I was going to do one earlier this week, but then Notre Dame quarterback commit Duce Knight took a visit to Auburn and all hell broke loose. I will be doing a mailbag next week, though, so please continue submitting your questions in the YouTube comments or on social media, and I promise I will get to them next Friday. But as for today, I had the chance to catch up with Locked On recruiting insider Brian Smith to provide the latest on Duce Knight's recruitment and where things stand with the coveted quarterback prospect. And look, there's no sugarcoating it. Notre Dame is in an absolute dogfight to keep him, and this could drag on for a while. But Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff are going to be really aggressive to do everything they can to keep him. And for more, let's bring in Brian. All right, Brian, Notre Dame has been in a bit of a slump on the recruiting trail, and to make matters worse, their prize commit in the class of 2025, four-star quarterback Duce Knight was reportedly on campus during Auburn's Big Cat weekend for a visit. What do you make of it?
I think this is kind of par for the course in recruiting in 2024-25. This is probably what nobody wants to hear, but just about every elite recruit is going to take visits after they commit to a school, Notre Dame included. And either you deal with it or you cut bait. You're not really capable of cutting bait as much as they want to say they are. And this is going to be tough for the pride for a lot of coaches at Notre Dame. If he decides to take another visit, what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? Whether it's Auburn or somebody else. Elite players dictate what's going to happen, not the school, not the coaches. So Nick Saban had to put up with it, and if Nick did, so does Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. I'm not shocked at all that he decided to take a visit. Auburn's not that far from where he lives. They've been recruiting him really hard, and I'm sure that they're putting out a really good pitch to him. So for him to, go to the campus and check it out, to me, it's not a big surprise and something that happens all the time in the South. But I think what caught a lot of people off guard was the fact that he visited Auburn and not Ole Miss, because for a while there, it always felt like Ole Miss was the biggest threat to Notre Dame because that's his home state. They have a very smart offensive head coach in Lane Kiffin. How did Auburn enter the fold?
Well, they were after Julian Lewis for a long time, and that fell through. Just to be blunt and get to the point, his dad is a pain. And his dad wants NIL money that is absolutely asinine. Julian's dad.
Yeah.
I don't know Duce's dad, but in Auburn said no. I don't know what he's going to get from USC if he sticks, but Julian's not going to get what his dad wants. I pretty much guarantee you that. I'll leave it there. And then they went on to try to get an offer to an in-state kid, KJ Lacey. KJ got the offer match from NIL from Texas, and I got a phone call saying he's sticking with that. The next guy was Duce. It's just, you have a list, and he was next. And I'm guessing they offered him, for what I'm told, the same thing they offered Julian, which again was nowhere near what Julian's dad wanted, but it's still a substantial amount. I've heard Notre Dame would match that. I don't know if that's true, but we'll see. This is just, it's all business. This is not recruiting with quarterbacks. Elite quarterbacks about business now. I know a lot of fans are screaming and throwing things to their TV, the old school Notre Dame people. If that's the case, you don't like it, don't watch Notre Dame football anymore because they're all going to get paid or they ain't coming. So that's just the reality of today's world. So I don't think he knew the whole thing. He wanted to sit down with coaches, which makes sense. And he went up to Big Cat weekend. So
from what you understand, how involved has the Notre Dame coaching staff been? Like, obviously, they're not going to be thrilled that Duce is taking other visits, but it does sound like Duce is at least letting them know so it didn't come as a shock to the coaching staff.
Yeah, I don't know the exact timing of the phone call and all that, but I think they knew the day of or the day before. I don't, again, that matters, but they knew. Auburn thought they were keeping it totally secret. I knew better than that. I was at Big Cat Weekend. I knew that was not going to be the case. 6'4.5" guys don't walk around on campuses like him and somebody not report it. It's just not possible. But he also called, from what I was told. So Notre Dame is not in the driver's seat, but either is Auburn. Again, with the elite recruits, the player is the one that's in the driver's seat. This is the way it is.
Absolutely. And I think now that Auburn is such a viable threat, some people might forget that Ole Miss is involved too. Do you look at it as a 2-horse race or a 3-horse race now with Notre Dame, Ole Miss, and Auburn for Deuce?
I wouldn't say it's in a number per se. Any school that's in an opportunity to get him on campus could at least get him there to talk NIL and like what they would do. But he's got such a relationship with Gaduli, and he knows the staff at Ole Miss well. He's just getting started to know Auburn. I don't know if he's talking to anybody else, but like Florida would probably, if he wanted to visit Florida, I doubt they would say no. Just using them as an example. I have no idea if they have any interest. But there's always a chance of somebody else with an elite kid because of NIL. Otherwise, you would have to think it's those three. Ole Miss is always a threat because it's the local school. You know what I mean? Like, he's a good fit for Kiffin's offense, etc. I get it. And it's State U.
I don't think it's a coincidence that Deuce is taking these visits right after Notre Dame whiffed on their top 3 wide receiver prospects in July. Derek Meadows, Dylan Robinson, and Tunuk Hines are all at the top of Notre Dame's board, and all 3 of them decided to commit elsewhere. How much do you think those misses have to do with Deuce's decision to start looking around a little bit more?
I don't think it has much to do with it at all, actually. I just think the NIL opportunities and stuff at other places, him and or his family wanted to check it out. This is individual. It's as close to free agency as you can get when it comes to elite quarterbacks. Again, I know people don't like to hear that, but I'm not here to spread anything but the facts. You're going to pay for big-time quarterbacks, or you're going to be a really bad football program. Those are your 2 options. So if he wants to go look around, he can. I don't know that I blame him because I would probably do the same thing. I'm not 17 and I'm not a guy with a 42-inch vertical, but Deuce has opportunities wherever he wants to go. So it really doesn't surprise me. And what's funny, I know there's a lot of hand-wringing on various Notre Dame message boards. This is mild. I mean, Georgia just lost an in-state kid from one of their prime programs to go all the way to the West Coast. It's all NIL. Everybody gets hammered with NIL at some point. You're going to lose kids in every single class because somebody else offered one of your kids more NIL. End of story.
That's kind of how I look at it, because I remember you and I had a conversation before about Peyton Bowen and how, like, it's been a couple years now and Notre Dame fans still talk about that because it was a really traumatic recruitment, lasted all the way beyond signing day. And
wild.
It's something that Notre Dame fans were like, wow, that was just a terrible experience to be a part of. But I feel like in the SEC, stuff like the Peyton Bowen thing happens for pretty much every good team at least once a cycle. So it might not be fun. It isn't fun on the Notre Dame side of things, but it's not necessarily unfamiliar territory when you're recruiting the top guys.
Again, it's NIL. I have off-the-record conversations with some of these kids. I don't blame them. I don't care if you're a rich kid. If somebody wants to offer you $500K to go to a school, you're an idiot not to at least entertain that offer. And sometimes the money's higher than that. What do you want me to say? Like, I get it. So it's going to continue. There is no policing of this stuff, and it's just kind of an open market. We don't even talk about what NIL is to cheating because NCAA's openly said they're not going to investigate anybody on it. It's like, you tell that to the SEC where they cheat like crazy anyway.
Yeah.
That's just like putting meat in front of the lion.
I'm not going to ask you to give a prediction on where he'll land because I don't think anyone truly knows at this point in time. But in terms of the timeline, do you see him dragging this out all the way up until signing day, or do you think that he'll come to a final decision sooner than later?
That's a great question. I would pose the answer in 2 parts. Number one, what's in his head may not be public. He's a pretty private kid, pretty quiet guy. I don't know when he will announce something, but he's told Notre Dame that he's still all in. I don't know how you can grade that after making visits, but whatever. I think you won't know until he puts pen to paper, though. Regardless of what he says at this point, again, it's always the same. Follow the visit. Now, he's visited Notre Dame 10 plus times. It's insane.
Yeah.
But he still just visited another school. He's been to Ole Miss, etc. it's not out of the realm that he doesn't sign with Notre Dame. So, and there's a couple other factors here. This is from my conversation with him last year. Geno is the reason he picked Notre Dame. He just really gets like they hit it off. And that's cool. If Geno were to leave, Notre Dame would be in trouble. Kids always pick coach instead of school. It's just the way it's always been. I know fans once again don't want to hear that. Coach is very important if they stay. If you don't believe me, look at the Ivan Taylor situation.
Yeah, I think actions speak louder than words. In the case of Duce, even though he's taking the visits, if he continues to recruit other guys in the class of 2025 aggressively to come to Notre Dame, I think that will ease some concerns for the Notre Dame fans, because that's one thing that he has done since the moment that he committed. He has been, outside of the Notre Dame coaching staff, Notre Dame's most vocal recruiter, and I think he's had a big impact on the trail. If that starts to go away, then I think I'm going to start to get really nervous here. But I know the Notre Dame coaching staff is going to go all out on Duce until Duce tells him to stop, probably. So if Notre Dame were to end up losing Duce Knight, how do you think the coaching staff would go about quarterback recruiting in this cycle? Do you think they try to get back with Bachmeier? Would they look somewhere else? What do you think is the backup plan, if they even have one?
Great question. I'm not sure, to be honest, because there's a lot of ways you can do this now. Number one, they already got Grubbs in the 26 class, who's really good. He won the accuracy challenge at the Under Armour Future 50 event. I'm not sure they would go after one. Because the kids they want, I just don't think are feeding. Now, they might make a few phone calls just to do due diligence, but I just don't think at this point, they would reach anything other than a lot of hard no's, because it's a relationship building. If kids pick coaches, not schools, they pick coaches. And it's been so long that they've had Duce committed, they've just missed all that time to build relationships with players B, C, D, E, and on down the line. So that would be tough sledding. The only exception to that, I could see them taking a kid that is a really athletic, kind of like Duce, maybe not that athletic, that might be able to play another position, because you got Grubbs, a more traditional pocket passer in the next class, to give you some variation.
Yeah, you've got Grubbs. You also have CJ Carr too. So even if Duce were to commit, it would obviously it'd be a big deal, but it wouldn't be like the sky is falling for the Notre Dame quarterback room, because they've recruited the position very well since Marcus Freeman took over. We'll be right back with Brian to hear his thoughts on where it all went wrong for Notre Dame wide receiver recruiting and how that may have impacted Duce Knight's recruitment. But first, I've got to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Look, I know I care a lot about my car, probably more than I should, because it's not necessarily the fanciest vehicle in the world, but whenever I need a part, I go straight to eBay Motors, and you should as well. So keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Okay, we talked a lot about the quarterbacks. I want to ask you about the wide receivers. As I mentioned earlier, Notre Dame missed out on Derek Meadows, Dylan Robinson, and Tanu Kynes. The way I understand it, it seems like Notre Dame kind of moved off Tanu Kynes a little bit later in the process. They went after Derek Meadows and Dylan Robinson a lot more. Let's start off with Meadows. Notre Dame did everything they could to get him, and he still opted to go to LSU. What do you think was the deciding factor there in that decision?
There's a lot of parts at play there. Not everybody in his camp wants him to be at Notre Dame. I'll leave it at that. So it's best to leave it there. I think if he had his own druthers, he'd pick Notre Dame. But this isn't a one-person situation. So we'll see if that changes. Notre Dame's not going to stop recruiting him. There's a chance that could change in time. Who knows? I think LSU's offense is going to be dynamic this year. Their defense is going to stink. But I don't know what's going on. That should never be the case, by the way. LSU should never have a bad defense, but they're probably going to again this year. But LSU's got a great receiver. It's probably going to first or second round again. That makes it really hard because Notre Dame's going to spread the ball. They're not going to have a number one guy that catches 75 balls. Kyron Lacey at LSU might catch 68 for like 1,100 yards. He's a burner, and he was just next up. They always have a guy in the way, and that's what kids want to see. Did you put a guy in the NFL? At receiver, it's a checkbox. Notre Dame just doesn't do that. So it's going to be hard with him or anybody else if they compete with LSU for receivers.
What about with Dylan Robinson? Because there were some people, there was like one school of thought that Dylan Robinson was much better suited to play defensive back in college. And it looks like that's what he's going to play now that he's committed to Washington, whereas Notre Dame wanted him to play wide receiver. When you evaluated him, what did you think of his film? Where did you think he was better off playing once he got to college? Because I think, there's a good argument to be made on both sides.
If I remember correctly, Washington had pitched even he might play a little both ways, which is always garbage.
Yeah, that's what you say in high school to get him to commit to you.
Yeah, that's called garbage. Any kid that believes that is an idiot. Okay, even Travis Hunter shouldn't be doing it. They're just terrible at Colorado. He has to. So, and he's about as twitchy a kid as I've ever seen. I think that he's a kid that can play safety. I don't think he's a corner. Now, there's nothing wrong with playing safety, but it's a position that gets beat up more and gets a lot less notoriety. If he thinks he's a corner, God bless him. I don't. Now, as a receiver, I think he could be the perfect boundary guy after a year or so. He's not an impact guy necessarily, but he's really athletic and he's got the frame you're looking for. It's weird I'm saying this, but Notre Dame just recruits corner a lot better. And forever, Notre Dame was not very good at recruiting corner, but they don't need him to come in for that. So that's why they went with the route they did. It is what it is, and if the kid just doesn't want to play the position you're recruiting, you're just not going to win. That one was just bad luck more than anything else.
Yeah, Notre Dame wide receiver coach Mike Brown has received a lot of criticism from the fan base for their misses at receivers. And I understand that. Like, he is the coach. He's had some time to develop these relationships with these recruits. But to me, when I look at the reasons why Meadows didn't go to Notre Dame and Dylan Robinson and some of these other guys, I think Notre Dame is still paying for the sins of the past, particularly
100%.
Del Alexander, and the fact that they just have not been able to attract high-end wide receiver talent and then develop them into pro prospects. So do you think it has more to do with the past than it does to do with the current coaching staff and the makeup and their efforts on the recruiting trail?
I 100% agree. Denbrock obviously knows how to get guys drafted. I mean, he had a guy at Cincinnati who ate Notre Dame alive when they played a few years ago. He had like 130 yards or whatever.
Pierce, yeah. Killed Notre Dame.
He smoked Notre Dame. That's a kid they developed that was not very highly recruited. And then you got kids at LSU who just had 2 first-round picks. So they know how to do it. Somebody needs to have at least some big games. Again, I know they're going to spread the ball around and they're good at tight end. I get it. Fair or not, elite wide receivers, it's like the first 5 things they check is the same. How many first, second-round picks have you had? That's just not the way Notre Dame's offense has worked. They're at a bad spot. Even if they develop the guys, they got a lot of depth at receiver. They got about 4 or 5 guys that are number 2 receiver. They don't have a number 1 until otherwise proven. And those are the guys that go in the first, second round. So I don't know how you do that, except to say you can be that guy that becomes the number 1. I do like Micah Gilbert long-term to be a first or second round pick. He's really good. But he hasn't played yet. You can't say he's a high school kid. They don't care about that. Notre Dame is going to have to develop and do the best they can and just take the 3 and 4-star kids and make them better. Basically what Cincinnati did under Denbrock. To be honest, he didn't even get as many. He didn't get Micah Gilbert, by the way. He did not. And he still had guys go really high. So there you go.
Without a doubt. And I think as fans point to Mike Brown as the reason why Notre Dame didn't get any wide receivers, I do put some responsibility on Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden as well, because Marcus Freeman was the lead recruiter on Meadows this entire time. And, obviously it's not Marcus Freeman's fault that Notre Dame didn't get good wide receivers before him, but I do think some of it falls on him and their strategy. So do you think that there's anything that this coaching staff could do differently in the short term to try to attract wide receivers? Or do you think it really all depends on how Notre Dame's offense produces under Mike Denbrock and how involved the wide receivers get in this new scheme?
The only thing different they could do is just really prioritize kids closer to home. I mean, Hines is Houston. Houston, you got Nevada, and you got a kid from California. Those are hard, even for Notre Dame. If it's an offensive tackle, it's one thing. Because they just had the 5th pick of the draft. It's easier. Maybe be a little more realistic with closer to home. I know Notre Dame, thinks big, and Marcus should. But they should have at least one kid from like a state that physically touches the border of Indiana every year committed by March at wide receiver until otherwise proven. Just to get a guy, kid that's an upside guy, kind of like Dylan was. Because they're not a destination for receiver recruiting until otherwise proven. They're not even in the stratosphere with it. So I don't remember one kid that I live down south that's talked about Notre Dame as like, okay, this would be really cool to play receiver. Now I know they're already in on some other guys. We're talking to one kid who might visit, et cetera. It's committed somewhere else, all that kind of stuff. And that's typical. But the elite kids, man, it's going to be hard until you prove it.
To your point about recruiting wide receivers out of Indiana, I was really surprised that they started recruiting John Anthony Hall so late in the process. And I understand that the scouting report on him varies significantly. I mean, you look at the different recruiting sites. I think one site has him as high as like a top 100 player, and then there's another site that doesn't even have him in the top 400. He's from Fishers, Indiana. Notre Dame offered him just a couple months ago. And to me, that was not a great sign because, like, okay, if he's basically living in their backyard and they haven't offered him until now, they obviously don't think that highly of him. And then he ends up going to Stanford. I don't think he really ever entertained Notre Dame that much, just given the fact that they entered the process so late. But where do you think Notre Dame goes from here, specific to wide receiver recruiting in this class? Because they only have 2 commits right now. One of them, Jerome Bettis Jr., looks like he might end up playing safety in college anyway. So they're starting pretty late, but they could still probably get a couple guys who just have a lot of work to make up for.
Number one, again, they're going to try to flip some guys, and there's always the chance for 2 more things. Number one, elite athletes at quarterback that can change positions. And then there's the kid that just hasn't committed somewhere else, kind of like Saldate. You know, they flipped him, but nobody thought that Oregon State was keeping him. No offense. You know, that's Notre Dame. That's good luck. Somebody like that is possible too. We'll just have to see. A kid that's playing running back can move. They could also move Justin Thurman to receiver. He can play outside. There's a lot of options, but I would rather they, until otherwise proven, be really picky. Don't waste the scholarship and just take at least one guy. And they'll probably take 2 again in the portal because they're going to need it. They're going to lose several guys after this year. So I would use the scholarships only for guys that are really good or wait for the portal.
All right, last question I have for you. Big picture, what can Notre Dame do to sort of right the ship here and try to get some momentum back with recruiting? Because, you know, they're still in the mix for 2 elite linebackers. They still have Duce Knight committed. And I feel like it's late and people are a bit down right now in Notre Dame recruiting. But I do think that there's a way that they could turn things around and finish strong. What do you think they need to do?
Well, first things first. A few weeks ago, I did a podcast with my buddy on the Locked On Auburn show, and they were just getting hammered. They've gotten like 7 commitments in the last week. Recruiting has wild swings. It has nothing to do with the effort of the coach or the recruiting administration. It's the kids when they want to decide. You don't get a pick when they're ready to make a decision. It's not how it works. It's not like a business plan where you put out a new marketing ad. That's not how it works. So that's first. And then 2, they need to beat Texas A&M. There's just no way around it. That's going to be a marquee game. I'm hearing Benjamin Morrison's going to play. If he does, I like the Irish. If he doesn't, I like A&M. I mean, he's a pretty important guy. So if they win that game, that's going to change your fortunes. It would help if they had a long touchdown pass in that game too, by the way.
All right, man. Thanks so much for the time. I'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting quite like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Here's my pick for the weekend, okay? Jose Ramirez, home run anytime. He's plus 360 right now on FanDuel, and the Guardians are going up against one of the best teams in baseball, the Baltimore Orioles. But Jose has been scorching hot lately, and I think he's going to put one over the right field fence at Progressive Field. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be back early next week to talk about more reports from Notre Dame preseason camp, as well as any updates we get about Duce Knight and his recruitment. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin is the host. He does a great job covering the sport from a national perspective. I've even been on the show a few times before, had a good time. Plus, I think I'm going to be on again a few more times in the near future. So go give that a listen. Also, please remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to podcasts. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you next week.